So welcome to Weaving Weird Studios. My name is Sig and this is my channel, and today we're going to be learning how to make these lips. Okay, so the pattern I'm showing you today in this tutorial is going to be for the lips, and each set of lips on each one of these motifs is basically the same pattern. It's the same pattern of lips, it's just different. So for example, this one is a natural fiber. For the rock and roll lips, I used natural fiber. And then this one for the sugar lips, I used a synthetic fiber, but it's a larger yarn. And so even though it's the same exact stitches and I followed the same exact pattern for this, this is clearly bigger than the one that I used the DK size yarn on. And you can see that I've done many different things. So for example, I've got a tassel here. This is an ornament to hang off a tree or the rear view mirror of your car. This one I have set up as a refrigerator magnet. The horror lips, my lips are sutured. I have this one set up as a keychain, as if they have been actually severed from somebody's body and put as a token. And then the next one are my vampire kisses. This one is made with the size 10 crochet thread. Again, the same exact pattern. I followed the same stitches. And on the back, there's a little piece of vinyl with a brooch pin that I affixed to it so that this could be worn as a brooch or just as a pin on your jacket or throw, on your purse or wherever you'd like to put it. These are just mostly ideas. So in the description box down below, I have given you the yarns that I've used and the beads, but you're not obligated to use those. Those are just merely suggestions, and I'm just giving you the idea of exactly what were the materials I used to make each one of these. The lips are the very same lips, so let your imagination run. You can use any type of yarn or thread, and it's going to give you a slightly different effect, but each one is going to still be pretty cool. Okay, so with all that said, I know you're ready to get started on the tutorial, but I have just a little bit more housekeeping to do before we can move on. So the first thing I'd like to mention is I'd like to give credit to a designer by the name of Lucia Lanucas. I think I'm pronouncing her name correctly. At any rate, her information will be in the description box down below. She is the designer who I took the basic lip pattern from. And once I adopted her lip pattern, I then altered it, I moderated it, I changed a few stitches on it just to suit my own personal taste and aesthetics. And then went to town with my own take on the lips. However, I would like to give her credit for that, since she was the one who provided me with the original lip design. And yeah, you can find her on Etsy, Ravelry, Facebook. Look at her other designs. They might be of interest to you. She's certainly very talented. And so the next bit of housekeeping that we really need to do is just to let you know, if you find this video helpful or of value, help my channel grow by liking and subscribing it. Also, if you're interested in receiving regular notifications of my newest videos, just go ahead and hit that notification bell. And with all that said, let's get started. First thing I want to do is make an adjustable ring. And in that adjustable ring, I want to go ahead and crochet 4 single crochets. So now I'm going to tighten my ring just a little bit. I don't want it too much just yet, because this is just a small beginning and we are working in a spiral. I don't want to lose my first single crochet that I'm going to start my rounds off of. Okay, so in the first single crochet that you made, second round, you're going to want to single crochet. And in your second stitch, you want to put 2 single crochets. And then in the third stitch, you want to put 1 single crochet. And in that fourth stitch, you want to put 2 single crochets. And that'll give you a total of 6 stitches in row 2. Now for row 3, we're going to want to put a single crochet in the first stitch, a single crochet in the second stitch, 2 single crochets in the third stitch, and then 1 single crochet in the next stitch, a single crochet in the next stitch, and then 2 single crochets in the following stitch. That brings us to the beginning of row 4, and by now we should have 8 stitches on this round. Round 4, we're going to do a single crochet in the next stitch, a single crochet in the next stitch, and a single crochet in the next stitch. The next stitch is going to have 2 single crochets. And then we're going to repeat that pattern again. So single crochet, a single crochet, a single crochet, and then 2 single crochets. And that brings us around to row 5, and we should have 10 stitches on our round now. So now we're going to go ahead and do a single crochet 4 times, and then 2 single crochets in the same stitch, and then again a single crochet in the next 4 stitches, and then that last stitch will have 2 single crochets. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then the next stitch is going to have 2 single crochets. And then the next 4 stitches are each going to have a single crochet. 1, 2, 3, 4, followed by the next stitch, which has 2 single crochets in it. And that's the finish of round 5, and we're going to begin round 6. So round 6 gets a little different now. We're going to switch up the pattern a bit, and we're going to do 2 single crochets in the next stitch. And then another 2 single crochets in the stitch after that. And then we're going to do a single crochet in the next 10 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. That'll leave us with 14 stitches on this round. And then for round 7, we're going to do a single crochet in the next stitch. And then 2 single crochets in the following stitch. And then 2 more single crochets in the stitch after that. And then we're going to do 11 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. Now that should leave us with 16 stitches on this round. So now for round 8, we're going to begin round 8 by doing 8 single crochet in the next stitch, 2 single crochets in the stitch after that, and then we're going to want to do 2 single crochets, 1, and then in the next stitch at the second single crochet. And then in the stitch after that, we're going to want to do 2 single crochets in that one stitch. And then we're going to want to single crochet 11 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And for this round, you're going to want to have 18 stitches total in this round. And this is what your piece should look like so far. We're beginning to do the upper part of the lip here. So now what we want to do is going to do 18 single crochets all the way around. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now once you've got 18 stitches all the way around, we're going to be doing row 10 next. And in row 10, it's going to be a single crochet in the next stitch. And then we're going to start at this point to decrease. So you're going to do an invisible decrease for your next stitch. And if you don't know how to do an invisible decrease, go ahead and see my video in the how-to section of the playlist on how to decrease or make an invisible decrease. And then we're going to go ahead and do a single crochet and another single crochet. And then I'm going to do an invisible decrease. And then I'm going to single crochet in the next 11 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So now this round should have a total of 16 stitches on this round. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to single crochet once and then single crochet again. And then an invisible decrease. And then single crochet once and again. And then an invisible decrease. We're going to do that 2 more times. Single crochet once and again, and an invisible decrease. And then our last one, single crochet, and then an invisible decrease. And that should leave us with 12 on our loop, or 12 on our round. Round 12, we're going to do a single crochet and a single crochet, and then an invisible decrease, and then 4 single crochets, and then an invisible decrease, and then 2 more single crochets. And that should leave us with 10 on our round. So for row 13, around 13, we're going to start increasing again. And so what we're going to do is a single crochet and a single crochet. And then in that third stitch, we're going to do 2 single crochets. And then we're going to do 4 single crochets. And then we're going to do 2 single crochets in the next stitch. And then we're going to single crochet once and then another time in the following stitch. So now for round 14, we're going to single crochet. And I'm going to do 2 single crochets in the next stitch. So now for row 14, we are going to do a single crochet. And then in the next stitch, we're going to do 2 single crochets. And then after that, a single crochet, and then a single crochet. And then 2 single crochets in the same stitch. And then again, 1 single crochet and 1 single crochet. And then 2 single crochets in the next stitch. And then a single crochet and a single crochet. And then 1 more, 2 single crochets in the next stitch. And you should end row 14 with 16 stitches on your round. Now for round 15, you're going to want to single crochet once, twice, a third time, and then 2 single crochets in the next stitch, and then a single crochet and a single crochet, and then 2 single crochets in the next stitch, and then a single crochet in the next 9 stitches. You should finish with 18 stitches on your round 15. Now for round 16, we're going to do a single crochet in each of those 18 stitches, ending with 18 stitches. 1, 2, Okay, so for now that we're beginning to do round 17, we're going to start to decrease again. So we're on the other side of that second part of the lip. And so for round 17, we're going to do a single crochet, a single crochet, and then a single crochet. And then we're going to do an invisible decrease. And then 2 single crochets. And then an invisible decrease. And then 9 single crochets. And that should give us a total of 16 stitches at the finish of round 17. Now for round 18, we're going to do 3 single crochets, then an invisible decrease, and one more time another invisible decrease, and then a single crochet in the next 9 stitches. That should give you 14 stitches at the end of round 18. Now for round 19, we're going to do 2 single crochets, and then an invisible decrease, and another invisible decrease, and we're going to single crochet in the next 8 stitches. So at the end of round 19, we should have a total of 12 stitches. Now for round 20, we're going to do a single crochet, and then an invisible decrease, and an invisible decrease again, and then we're going to single crochet in the next 7 stitches. So at the end of round 20, you should have 10 stitches on your round. And we begin round 21 with a single crochet, and then an invisible decrease, and then 3 single crochets, and then an invisible decrease, and 2 more single crochets, leaving us with 8 stitches on the round. And now this is a good time to stuff your top lip. Okay, so we're going to take a minute and lightly stuff this top lip. So now when you stuff your lips, you don't want to stuff them so much and so firm that you're going to not be able to manipulate your lips into a shape that you want them to be in terms of adding embellishments or giving them additional personality. You also don't want it to be so full that you see the stuffing through the holes in the stitches of your lips. So this is where you you know, where it's important to decide if you're going to do a yarn over or yarn under technique, right? It's all really up to you. I guess depends on your skill level and your comfort level. Your yarn under technique is going to make a tighter stitch. That's really a nice stitch to keep in mind when doing the amigurumis. This particular lip, I'm actually just doing your standard yarn over, but I have a couple of the other lips that I've already discussed with you that I did with a yarn under technique. So you can kind of get a feel for the difference in look and size of the different yarns being used with those different techniques. So we're going to go ahead and continue. We have just finished row 21. We should have 8 stitches on our round, and we should have our top lips gently stuffed. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to single crochet in that next stitch. And then I'm going to do an invisible decrease. And then I'm going to single crochet in the next 2 stitches. And then I'm going to do an invisible decrease. And I'm going to do one more single crochet to finish out that row. And you should have 6 stitches on that round. And now we're going to start round 23. And with round 23, I'm going to do a single crochet and then an invisible decrease. And then I'm going to do another single crochet. And I'm going to finish off with an invisible decrease. And I'm going to get my yarn needle, and then I'm going to weave my ends in, and I will have finished my top lip. And we will be right back to show you how to do the bottom lip. Okay, so let's get started on the bottom lip. Again, just as before, we're going to start with an adjustable ring, and we're going to crochet 4 single crochets in that adjustable ring. And gently pull my ring, not too tight, because I still want to get into that first stitch without too much trouble. And then as before, I'm going to go ahead, we're going to stitch a single crochet into that first single crochet of the first round. And then I'm going to put 2 single crochets into the second stitch. And then the next stitch, 1 single crochet. And then the next stitch, 2 single crochets. So at the end of round 2, we should have 6 stitches. Now for round 2, we're going to do a single crochet and another single crochet in the next stitch. Two single crochets in the next stitch. A single crochet in the next stitch. A single crochet in the stitch after that. And then in that last stitch, 2 single crochets. So we should now have a total of 8 stitches. in this round. So for round 4, we're going to do 3 single crochets, and then 2 single crochets in the next stitch, and then 3 single crochets, and then the last stitch in that round will be 2 single crochets. So now you should have 10 stitches for round 4. Now for round 5, we're going to do kind of the same pattern, right? So we're going to have 4 single crochets. And then 2 single crochets in that next stitch. And then 4 single crochets. And then 2 single crochets in the last stitch of that row, leaving us with 12 stitches for round 5. So for round 6, we're going to do things a little differently. We're going to do 2 single crochets in that first stitch, and then 2 single crochets in the next stitch, and then a single crochet in the next 10 stitches. 1, 2. So at the end of row 6, you should have 14 stitches. And then for row 7, we're going to single crochet in the first stitch. And then we're going to do 2 double crochets in the next stitch. And then 2 double crochets in the stitch after that. And then we're going to do a single crochet in the next 11 stitches. And that gives us 16 stitches total all the way around in row 7. Now for rows 8 through 13, so that's the next 6 rows, you are going to just do a single crochet in each row. So for rows 8 through 13, you're going to end up with 16 stitches per row. So this is what your piece should look like now. And you should be ready to start row 14. So for row 14, we're going to actually start to do some decreasing. So we're going to begin with 3 single crochets. And then I'm going to do an invisible decrease. And then another invisible decrease. And then I'm going to single crochet in the next 9 stitches. And then in row 15, so just to back up just for a minute, row 14 should have 14 stitches. And then in row 15, we're going to go ahead and single crochet 2 times. And then I'm going to do an invisible decrease. And then another invisible decrease. And then I'm going to single crochet in the last 8 stitches. Okay, so that brings us down to 12 stitches for row 15. Now for row 16, we're going to single crochet in the next stitch, or in this case, the first stitch of row 16. And then I am going to do an invisible decrease once, and then an invisible decrease one more time. And then I'm going to single crochet in those last 7 stitches. And that leaves me with 10 stitches for row 16. Now for row 17, we're going to single crochet in that first stitch. And then do an invisible decrease, and then 3 single crochets. Then another invisible decrease. And then 2 more single crochets, leaving us with 8 stitches in round 17. This is also a good time to stuff our bottom lip. So now that we have it stuffed, it's not too firm. We're going to move on to round 18. And in round 18, we're going to single crochet. And then I'm going to do an invisible decrease. And then 2 single crochets. Another invisible decrease. And then a single crochet. And that should leave us with 6 stitches on our round. And then we're going to move on to round 19. And round 19 is going to be a single crochet. And then a invisible decrease. And then a single crochet. And then an invisible decrease one more time. And I am going to finish it off there. I'm going to take my yarn needle. And then, so you see how this kind of pulls out a little bit as you get down there to those really tiny, tight stitches towards the end. That's an easy fix. So you're just going to go ahead and you're just going to weave that tail in a little bit. And as you weave it in, you're just going to tighten up that end so that it matches the other side a little bit. It's a little bit of a cheater, but it'll save you a lot of grief. And especially depending on the yarn you're using, because some yarn's going to allow you to really make a nice clean taper right at the very end. And then other yarn, you know, it's going to have a little stretch, it's going to have a little pull to it. you know, it's just going to frustrate you to try to get too crazy with that. So you can make a nice clean matching edge just like this. And in this case, because we're going to go ahead and we're going to be sewing our bottom lip on to the upper lip like so, you're not even going to notice it. It's not even going to be an issue for you as far as that little, almost it's a little sort of messy here, but you'll be able to clean it up just fine or hide it or whatever. It's not going to be an issue for you. Okay, so let me finish this up and we shall get started on the tongue. So let's get started with the tongue now. Change my colors. And I'm going to start off with an adjustable ring. And we're going to single crochet 6 single crochets in that adjustable ring. I'm going to pull that adjustable ring a little tighter. And you may need a stitch marker for this. This one I'm going to also work in a spiral. So you're going to have to either use stitch markers, which is really a good idea, or just make sure you stay on top of your counts. Okay. So in that first stitch of round 1, I'm going to make a single crochet. And then I'm going to do 2 single crochets in the next stitch. And then I'm going to do a single crochet. And then 2 single crochets in the next stitch. And then one more time, a single crochet. And then 2 single crochets in the next stitch. And that'll leave me with 9 stitches to begin my round with. And then at this point, I'm going to tighten my circle up a little bit. So in my next round, I'm going to do 2 double crochets in each stitch. And that'll give me a total of 18 in this next round. In my next round, I'm going to do 18 single crochets. And then in round 5, we're also going to do 18 single crochets. In round 6, 18 more single crochets. Now in the first stitch of row 7, I'm going to do 2 single crochets. And then 8 single crochets. and then 2 single crochets in the next stitch, and then 8 more single crochets to finish up the row, making row 7 20 stitch count. Now for row 8, we're going to start it off with a single crochet. And then in the next stitch, we're going to do 2 single crochets. Then I'm going to single crochet 8 stitches. And then the next stitch, I'm going to do 2 single crochets. And then I'm going to do 9 single crochets to finish up the row. So at the end of row 8, you should have 22 stitches on the round. Now we're going to do 2 single crochets in that first stitch. And then 10 single crochets. And then that next stitch, 2 single crochets in there. And then 10 more single crochets to finish up round 9. This should leave you with 24 stitches in the round, or for this row. For rows 10 to 13, single crochet in each row, 24 stitches. Again, that will be rows 10 to 13. Okay, so now I'm going to finish this off, and I'm going to do a back stitch right down the center of my tongue to give it some definition. And when I return, I will show you what it looks like all assembled into the lips. Okay, so now that the tongue is finished, I have sewn it into the lips. You can see I put in the beads for the teeth. The tongue can be pretty much positioned almost any way you want to. It's really kind of interesting the way it does that. For this piece, what I did was I took a piece of felt, just craft felt, and I whip stitched it onto the back, and then I glued a magnet onto this because this I'm going to use as a refrigerator magnet. Now, once you get to the point where you're ready to actually sew your piece together, this is when you start shaping and pushing and sewing things into the position that you like best. You don't really need me to show you how to do that or how I do that because it's pretty self-explanatory and you'll figure out which way you like best yourself. So I want to thank you for joining me today. And as usual, I really enjoyed our time together. And with that said, I want to encourage you to just stay crafty.